It was one of those golden afternoons where the sun hung high in the sky, gently warming the world below, and the faint scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the sweet aroma of blooming flowers. Our neighborhood, a gated suburban community called Meadowbrook Estates, was the kind of place real estate agents would advertise with words like safe, family-friendly, and exclusive, with well-manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and a strict homeowners association that prided itself on maintaining order. But beneath that picturesque surface simmered a culture of control, pettiness, and entitlement, a world where people like Karen Whitmore thrived. Karen was the self-appointed enforcer of HOA rules, though she held no official title. A middle-aged woman with tightly curled blonde hair, perpetually pursed lips, and the ever-present clipboard in her hand, Karen had made it her mission to monitor everyone else's business. It didn't matter whether you complied with HOA bylaws or not. In Karen's eyes, you were always one step away from being reported. My name is Nathan Calloway, and I'm the chief of police in our city. But here in this little enclave of smug privilege, I was just another homeowner, and more importantly, a father to my precious daughter, Emily. Emily was 12 years old, born with cerebral palsy, which made movement difficult for her. She used a lightweight wheelchair and loved swimming because it gave her a sense of freedom her body didn't allow on land. Emily was bright, kind-hearted, and adored by her teachers and friends, though she'd had her share of run-ins with kids and adults too ignorant or cruel to treat her with respect. That day, Emily had been eagerly waiting for her afternoon swim. The community pool was one of the few places she truly loved. In water, she didn't need her chair, and her movements weren't confined. I made sure to take her there often, knowing how much it meant to her. The pool was supposed to be open to all residents and their families during daylight hours, and I had triple-checked the schedule for the day. Emily changed into her new blue swimsuit, her face lit with excitement as I helped her transfer into the water. She paddled about, her giggles echoing in the air, her happiness radiating like sunlight. I was reading a book nearby, glancing up every so often to check on her when the storm known as Karen arrived. I noticed her before I heard her. Storming up the sidewalk in her pastel polo shirt and press khakis, her lips moving in what I could only imagine were muttered complaints. Her eyes narrowed when she spotted Emily in the pool. Karen immediately beelined toward me, face tight with disapproval, and launched into one of her infamous tirades about rules and proper conduct. I calmly pointed out that Emily was a resident and had every right to use the pool, and besides, no other families were there that afternoon. But reason was not a language Karen understood. She sniffed disdainfully, claiming Emily posed a safety risk and that handicapped persons required special permits for public amenities, a statement so ignorant it made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, choosing not to reveal my badge, not yet, thinking perhaps diplomacy could diffuse the situation. But Karen wasn't interested in resolution. Instead, she pulled out her phone and, with performative authority, dialed 911. Yes, I need officers dispatched to Meadowbrook Estates pool immediately, she announced loudly enough for Emily to hear, causing my daughter's happy expression to crumble. There's a suspicious individual violating HOA safety protocols. I felt a surge of fury at the distress in Emily's eyes, but forced myself to stay calm, knowing the responding officers would be my people. Yet, the fact Karen would escalate a situation involving a child with a disability by involving law enforcement made it clear this wasn't about rules. It was about power. Within minutes, 2 squad cars arrived, lights flashing those sirens were silent. Officers Ramirez and Collins stepped out, surprised to find me there. Their eyes widened fractionally, but their training held as they approached with professionalism. Karen puffed up, pointing an accusatory finger at Emily, who clung to the pool's edge, frightened and confused. That child doesn't belong here. Karen shrieked. She's endangering community safety. What if she drowns? Or contaminates the water? We have standards. It took every ounce of restraint not to explode at her. Officer Ramirez cleared his throat and spoke gently to Emily, asking if she was okay. I intervened then, standing and revealing my badge. Chief Calloway. I introduced myself, my voice cold as ice. Karen paled, the color draining from her face as the realization dawned. Is there a problem here, Karen? I asked, each word a quiet, controlled threat. She stammered, trying to explain, to backtrack, claiming she was only concerned for safety. But it was too late. The officer's body cameras had captured every word, every accusation, and more importantly, Emily's terrified face. I ordered an official complaint filed against Karen that afternoon was like a storm creeping slowly across a horizon. Silent at first, but carrying a promise of reckoning. After the officers had left, after Karen's voice had stopped shrieking long enough for Emily to climb from the pool, shaken but unbroken, I brought my daughter home. The drive back through our tree-lined streets felt heavier than usual, and Emily was uncharacteristically quiet, her blue eyes gazing out the window, shoulders hunched as if she were shrinking into herself. It was the kind of silence that no parent ever wanted to witness in their child, the kind born not of sadness, but of humiliation, the kind inflicted not by fate, but by people who should have known better. I told Emily she had done nothing wrong, that she was brave, and that people like Karen would never determine her worth. She gave me a small, brittle smile, but her eyes remained distant. That night, as I tucked her into bed, I promised her I would make things right. And when I made a promise, I kept it. The first thing I did was file an official harassment complaint against Karen Whitmore through the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. I drafted a letter complete with body cam footage timestamps, written statements from officers Ramirez and Collins, and a formal demand for an emergency HOA board meeting to address Karen's misconduct. The next morning, the HOA's president, a jittery man named Frank Delaney, called me personally, his voice thick, with nervous apology. Frank had always been more talk than action, a man who loved the idea of authority, but wilted in its presence. I made it clear that the matter wouldn't be swept under the rug. This isn't just a neighborly dispute, I told him. This is a violation of federal disability law and an abuse of emergency services. Frank hemmed and hawed, but within 48 hours, a special HOA board meeting was scheduled at the Meadowbrook Community Center. Word traveled fast in our tightly wound neighborhood. By the time Thursday evening arrived, the meeting room was packed. Dozens of residents, some out of curiosity, others out of loyalty to Karen or in anticipation of scandal. The chairs were arranged in neat rows, but the atmosphere was anything but orderly. Karen arrived in her usual pastel attire, but her confident gait had turned brittle, her eyes darting around the room as whispers followed her. I could see the flicker of unease in her face when she realized just how many people were present and how few offered her a warm greeting. Emily stayed home that evening at my urging. She didn't need to see this, though part of me wished she could witness the consequences unfolding. I took a seat near the front as Frank Delaney called the meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. We've convened tonight to address a serious incident reported at the community pool involving residents Karen Whitmore and Emily Calloway. He began, his voice unsteady. Karen immediately raised a hand, interrupting him. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that my intentions were purely to uphold community safety standards, she declared, her voice tight with manufactured innocence. A murmur rippled through the room, some nodding, others scowling. I rose to my feet, then, setting down a thick manila envelope on the table before the board. I'd like to present evidence regarding Ms. Whitmore's conduct on June 17th, I said, and motioned for Frank to play the footage. The room quieted as the large monitor flickered to life, displaying the body cam footage. Every word of Karen's shrill accusations filled the room. The cruel remarks about Emily contaminating the water, her claim that disabled individuals needed permits, her smug 911 call, and a moment I revealed my badge. Gasps filled the space, some residents shaking their heads in disgust, others exchanging wide-eyed glances. By the time the video ended, the silence was suffocating. Karen sat rigid, her face flushed, lips pressed together in a bloodless line. Frank cleared his throat. This is deeply troubling, he stammered, adjusting his tie. Ms. Whitmore, would you care to explain? Karen surged to her feet. It was taken out of context, she sputtered. I was thinking of the safety of everyone. If something happened to that child, her name is Emily, I snapped, my voice sharp as a whip, silencing her. And the only danger that day came from you. I laid out my case in full detail, citing Meadowbrook's own bylaws that permitted all residents and their immediate families unrestricted access to community facilities, the federal protections under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the misuse of 911 services. Then, with a level, steady tone, I announced that I had also filed a report with the city's legal department requesting that charges for false reporting and harassment be formally considered. The room broke into a chorus of murmurs again, this time less uncertain. Several neighbors voiced their disapproval. It's disgraceful, one woman muttered. Poor girl, she's just a child, another man said, shaking his head. The tide was turning fast, and Karen could sense it. Her posture stiffened defensively, and she resorted to attacking me personally, attempting to frame the entire incident as a vendetta. You've always resented me because I uphold the rules while you let your household run wild, she accused, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. I allowed her to finish before speaking, my voice low and controlled. I've never resented you, Karen. I pity you. You confuse authority with cruelty and order with oppression. But this time, you crossed the line. Frank called for a vote of censure, a rare disciplinary action within the HOA meant to formally rebuke a member for misconduct. The board members, visibly uncomfortable, raised their hands one by one, unanimous. Karen was officially censured, stripped of any volunteer positions within the HOA, and banned from approaching the pool for 6 months. But that wasn't enough. Not for me, not for Emily, and not for what was right. In the days following the meeting, I received dozens of emails and calls from other residents sharing stories of Karen's overreach, petty fines for lawn decorations, complaints about children playing on sidewalks, notes left on cars about minor parking infractions. A pattern emerged, and I documented every one of them. Simultaneously, the city attorney's office picked up the complaint I filed. Given my position as chief, I recused myself from any involvement in their decision-making process, but I knew the evidence spoke for itself. Karen was summoned for an official hearing regarding her misuse of emergency services. The charge was a misdemeanor, but with the added weight of the ADA violations and public harassment, it carried serious consequences. Meanwhile, the local newspaper caught wind of the story. It started with a brief article about a HOA dispute involving a disabled child and spiraled into a full-blown exposé when a journalist requested the body cam footage through a public records request. The published piece, titled Community Official Harris's Disabled Child at Local Pool, ignited a firestorm. The public backlash was swift and merciless. Social media roasted Karen, labeling her everything from poolside Karen to Meadowbrook tyrant. Neighbors began avoiding her at the supermarket. A local disability advocacy group staged a small protest outside the Meadowbrook HOA office, demanding stricter protections for residents with disabilities and harsher penalties for those who abuse positions of power. Karen's world, once so tightly controlled, began unraveling at the seams. Her smugness disappeared, replaced by frantic attempts to salvage her reputation. She issued a public apology through a lawyer, though it reeked of self-preservation more than genuine remorse. Emily, meanwhile, started to bloom again. Though she remained wary at the pool, the outpouring of kindness from friends and neighbors bolstered her spirits. One afternoon, a group of kids invited her to swim with them, and Emily hesitated only a moment before accepting, her laughter returning to the water. I watched from the sidelines, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. But justice wasn't finished. Not yet, because what Karen didn't know was that another, larger storm was about to hit, and this time it would come from an unexpected source. The weeks following the HOA meeting were a strange mixture of vindication and simmering tension. Karen had lost her authority in the neighborhood, her reputation torn to shreds both online and among the residents of Meadowbrook Estates, But the legal consequences of her actions still loomed in the air like a coming storm. The city attorney's office, no longer able to dismiss the incident as a petty neighborhood squabble given the body cam evidence, public backlash, and ADA violations, moved forward with formal charges. Karen Whitmore was officially charged with filing a false police report, harassment, and violating state disability protection laws, the kind of combination that made even seasoned prosecutors sit up a little straighter. Though the charges were misdemeanors, the combined effect could result in significant fines, probation, and a permanent stain on her record. But what Karen never anticipated was that someone from her own world would rise against her. It turned out that during the backlash, a woman named Abigail Reese, a quiet, reserved resident known more for her meticulous rose garden than public confrontations, came forward with a startling confession. Abigail had served as HOA secretary years before and revealed in a sworn statement that Karen had for years manipulated HOA decisions behind the scenes, falsifying complaints, rigging votes, and even targeting vulnerable families to push them out of the community. She admitted that she'd once helped Karen draft a fraudulent letter threatening eviction against an elderly war veteran for failing to edge his lawn properly. That revelation shattered whatever fragile foundation Karen had left to stand on. The HOA launched a full internal audit, discovering years of abuses and ethical violations. Every petty citation, every unjust fine, every harassing note was logged and reviewed. The sheer volume of misconduct was staggering, and it became painfully clear that Karen's harassment of Emily was not a one-time lapse in judgment, but part of a long-standing pattern of bullying disguised as rule enforcement. As all this unfolded, Emily began to regain the spark Karen's cruelty had dimmed. She resumed her swims at the community pool, now accompanied by a rotating roster of neighborhood kids eager to stand by her side. The same residents who had once kept silent in the face of Karen's tyranny were now apologizing to Emily, offering her words of encouragement and treats from their kitchens. She accepted them with shy smiles, slowly rebuilding her trust in the people around her. Meanwhile, Karen's legal troubles deepened. The city attorney's office added additional charges when it was discovered that Karen had also attempted to delete security footage from the HOA office's internal surveillance system on the day of the incident. A rookie mistake. She failed to realize the server backed up offsite. This act of tampering turned a misdemeanor into a felony count of evidence destruction. Karen was arrested in front of her home one humid afternoon, her wrists shackled in front of the same neighbors she once scolded for placing trash bins too close to the curb. The image of her being loaded into a squad car, red-faced and shrieking about conspiracies, was captured on more than a dozen smartphones and instantly circulated through the neighborhood's private Facebook group, and then beyond, gaining thousands of views within hours. The trial date was set for the end of summer. By then, public opinion had decisively turned against Karen. Even her closest allies, the other self-important busybodies of Meadowbrook, distanced themselves from her name. Vendors refused to service her home, local stores whispered behind her back, and the media dubbed her Poolside Karen, the moniker sticking like a brand. The courtroom was packed the day proceedings began. Journalists lined the back wall, notepads ready, while disability rights advocates and Meadowbrook residents filled every bench. I sat front row, not because I sought personal satisfaction, but because I wanted to bear witness for Emily, who waited back home with her mother and friends, shielded from the media circus. The prosecution laid out its case with precision, presenting the body cam footage, HOA records, Abigail Reese's testimony, and the attempt to destroy surveillance files. Karen's defense strategy was predictably weak, painting her as a concerned citizen overwhelmed by the weight of HOA responsibilities and public pressure. The jury wasn't moved. They didn't see a stressed resident. They saw a woman who'd weaponized her authority, who had humiliated a disabled child in broad daylight, and then tried to cover it up. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman with little patience for theatrics, delivered a scathing rebuke from the bench. This court finds Ms. Whitmore's actions not only criminal but morally reprehensible. The abuse of authority, The targeting of a vulnerable child and the attempt to destroy evidence constitute a grave breach of public trust. Your behavior has done lasting harm not just to your victim, but to your entire community. Karen was sentenced to a year of probation, 500 hours of community service, specifically ordered to be completed at a local disability services center, and a substantial fine to be paid to Emily's family as restitution. But in many ways, the true sentence was social exile. No one spoke to her anymore. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid her. The HOA stripped her of membership privileges entirely, and by year's end, Karen was forced to sell her Meadowbrook home at a loss, moving away in disgrace. Meadowbrook estates changed in the wake of it all. The HOA board was overhauled, new bylaws written to protect against abuses of authority. Disability access improvements were made to community facilities. The community pool now featured a mural painted by local kids, including Emily, depicting an underwater scene filled with bright fish and a girl in a blue swimsuit swimming free among them. Emily's name was etched at the bottom in bold, proud letters. The following spring, a plaque was installed by the pool reading, "In honor of every child's right to belong." Emily stood taller after that. The experience had left scars, yes, but also a deeper resilience. She joined the school's advocacy club, gave a speech about inclusion, and even taught a summer swim class for other kids with disabilities. Watching her grow into her own strength was a source of endless pride for me, a reminder that sometimes even the worst storms leave behind fertile ground for new things to bloom. As for me, I learned the power of a quiet promise made beside a child's bed and the weight of a father's duty not just to protect, but to vindicate. In the end, Meadowbrook became a better place. Not perfect, but kinder, quieter, more aware. And though Karen's name would be spoken now, only in hushed tones and cautionary tales, Emily's story was one of triumph. One she would carry with her for the rest of her days, and one I would never stop telling, because every community, every neighborhood, every child deserves the kind of justice that leaves no room for cruelty to hide. And for those who forget, there will always be someone like me ready to remind them.